When Amelia Harris notices her husband's eyes turning unnaturally dark, she dismisses it as stress or illness, but when George collapses dead in their kitchen with those same black eyes and their 5-year-old son Leo momentarily displays identical obsidian orbs, she realizes something beyond medical explanation has invaded her family. Driven by a mother's desperate love, Amelia uncovers a generations-old curse binding the Harris bloodline to an entity that passes from father to son. With ancient diaries hidden in dusty attics, mysterious bookshop owners in seaside towns, and shadowy organizations monitoring her every move, Amelia faces an impossible choice. Watch as the darkness that took her husband slowly consumes her innocent child, or make a sacrifice that defies everything she believes about the world around her. In the ruins of Whitby Abbey, as midnight approaches and dimensions thin, what price is she willing to pay to break a centuries-old curse? Amelia knew something was wrong when George's eyes, her husband's eyes, began to change, to darken, and he started looking at her as if he was no longer the man she loved. The first time she noticed it was during breakfast. 5-year-old Leo was creating more mess than meal with his jam toast. George had been stirring his tea for far too long, staring into the swirling liquid as if seeking answers. "George?" Amelia said, reaching across the table. He looked up, and the darkness in his eyes made her recoil. Not just the color, it was the emptiness behind them, as if something essential had been replaced with shadow. "Yes, love?" he replied, his voice normal, his smile the same, but his eyes weren't his anymore. At 34, Amelia had already weathered the sudden death of both parents in a car crash on the M25. Their absence had left a void that even George's steadfast love couldn't entirely fill. But this gradual disappearance of her husband, while he still sat across from her, was a new kind of pain. George had always been her anchor. A senior developer at a tech firm in Canary Wharf, he'd built their life with meticulous care, their savings, their modest home in Harrow, their future together. He'd been the one to insist on life insurance policies despite their youth. "Better to be prepared, love," he'd say, with that practical Yorkshire pragmatism. It started with nightmares. George would wake screaming, babbling about shadows that spoke to him in languages he couldn't understand. Amelia would hold him until the trembling stopped, whispering reassurances while fear gnawed at her insides. "It's just stress," he'd insisted. "The Phillips project is killing everyone at work." But Amelia knew better. The Phillips project had ended 3 weeks ago, and George had begun locking himself in the garden shed for hours, claiming he needed to think. Twice she'd found him standing in the garden after midnight, face tilted toward the starless London sky, whispering. When she convinced him to see Dr. Mahmood, the diagnosis had been frustratingly vague: exhaustion, possibly depression. The pills sat untouched on their bathroom shelf. "There's nothing wrong with me that needs medicating," he'd said flatly. "I'm just adjusting." Adjusting to what? Amelia had demanded, but he'd only walked away, leaving her question hanging like a threat. That was 3 weeks ago. Since then, the darkness in his eyes had grown, spreading like ink in water. Some days they seemed completely black, pupil and iris indistinguishable. Leo had noticed too. "Why are Daddy's eyes getting all dark?" he'd asked yesterday, clutching his stuffed rabbit. "Mr. Hoppy, Daddy's just very tired," Amelia had lied. Sometimes when grown-ups are tired, they look different. Leo had nodded solemnly. When will he stop being tired? Soon, she'd promised, another lie that tasted bitter. Now, an evening descended over their home. Amelia sat at the kitchen table, a cold cup of tea before her. The clock ticked relentlessly. 9:47 p.m. outside. Light rain pattered against the windows like impatient fingers. The sound of a key in the lock made her jump. George appeared in the doorway, raindrops glistening in his dark hair. "You're home," she said. "Would you like some dinner? I've kept a plate." The words died in her throat. George's face was ashen, his lips bloodless, but it was his eyes that stopped her heart. Completely black now, as if filled with ink. He swayed slightly, gripping the door frame. "Amelia," he whispered, his voice strange, layered somehow. "I can't hold it back anymore." "Hold what back?" she asked, barely audible over the roaring in her ears. "George, tell me what's happening to you." He stumbled toward her. "It's in our blood. It's always been there, waiting. My mother tried to warn me, but I didn't believe her. Thought they were just stories, superstitions from the old country." His laugh was hollow. "But it's real, Amelia, and now it wants Leo." Ice flooded her veins. "What wants Leo?" she demanded, moving between her husband and the staircase. "George, you're scaring me." "You should be scared," he said, black eyes fixed on her. "I can feel it pushing me out, taking over. Soon there won't be anything left of me, and then it will come for him." "For who? For Leo?" "George, please don't," Amelia pleaded, tears streaming down her face. "Let me help you." "No one can help," George interrupted, suddenly calm. "Except maybe you. There's something my mother left in the attic. Her diaries, letters. She said if it ever happened to me..." He broke off with a gasp, clutching his head in pain. "George!" Amelia rushed forward. "No!" he shouted, backing away. "Stay back. I don't know what it will make me do." Then he froze, his body rigid, his mouth opened in a silent scream, and for one terrible moment Amelia thought she saw something moving beneath his skin. "Amelia, he's coming back." And then George collapsed, his body crumpling to the kitchen floor with terrible finality. Amelia screamed, dropping to her knees beside him. "George! George!" She shook him, searching frantically for any sign of life. His skin was already cooling, his black eyes staring sightlessly at the ceiling. In her panic, she didn't hear the soft footsteps on the stairs until a tiny voice spoke. "Mummy!" Amelia's head snapped up. Leo stood there in his dinosaur pajamas, Mr. Hoppy dangling from one hand. But it wasn't his unexpected appearance that made her heart stop. It was his eyes, black as midnight, black as George's had been, black as death itself. "Mummy," Leo said again, his voice oddly adult, oddly familiar. "He's gone now, but I'm still here." Amelia's scream echoed through the house, but there was no one left to hear it. Hours later, after the paramedics had come and gone with George's body, leaving Amelia with platitudes about sudden heart failure, she sat on Leo's bed, watching him sleep. The doctors had examined him too, confused by her hysterical insistence that something was wrong with his eyes. "They look perfectly normal," the young paramedic had assured her. "Shock can make us see strange things, Mrs. Harris." Indeed, Leo's eyes were their normal hazel now. Had she imagined it? Was grief already playing tricks on her mind? But she couldn't shake George's last words. "It wants Leo." And that diary, supposedly hidden in the attic. George's mother had been a strange woman, full of superstitions from rural Yorkshire. She died when Leo was just a baby, but Amelia remembered her warnings about the family curse and how the men in their line never lasted long. Amelia had dismissed it as the ramblings of an old woman. Now she wasn't so sure. Leo stirred in his sleep. "Daddy," he murmured, reaching out blindly. Amelia took his hand. "It's okay, baby. Mummy's here." But even as she said it, a terrible thought bloomed. What if it wasn't Leo who needed protection? What if George had been protecting them from something far worse? Outside, the rain had stopped and a strange silence descended. Amelia felt an overwhelming urge to search the attic, to find those diaries. But she couldn't leave Leo, not tonight. Tomorrow, she decided, tomorrow she would unravel the mystery of what had happened to her husband. Tomorrow, she would find out what dark legacy threatened her son. For tonight, all she could do was keep watch and pray that whatever had taken George wouldn't return for Leo. But as the night deepened and her son's breathing grew troubled, Amelia knew with a certainty that chilled her to the bone that this was only the beginning. The morning after George's death dawned grey and misty over Harrow. Amelia hadn't slept, her mind replaying the horror of the previous night in an endless loop. Leo, however, had slept peacefully after his strange moment in the doorway, waking with no memory of the incident and normal hazel eyes. "Where's Daddy?" he asked over breakfast, spoon poised midway to his mouth. Amelia's heart constricted. "Daddy's gone away, sweetheart," she said, the half-truth easier than the full one. How could she explain to a 5-year-old that his father was dead when she herself didn't understand what had happened? "When's he coming back?" Leo's eyes, innocent and clear, searched hers. "He's not, love." Amelia knelt beside him, taking his small hands in hers. "Sometimes people have to go away forever, but Daddy loved you very much." Leo's lower lip trembled. "Is it because of the bad man?" Amelia froze. "What bad man, Leo?" "The one that was making Daddy's eyes all dark. The one that whispers at night." He looked down at his cereal. "I don't like him." A chill ran through Amelia's body. When does this bad man whisper, Leo?" "When I'm sleeping. But sometimes when I'm awake too." He met her gaze, solemnly. "He says he's my real daddy." Amelia felt the room tilt around her. George's words echoed in her mind. "It wants Leo." "Leo, this is very important," she said, keeping her voice steady with effort. "If you hear this bad man again, you must tell me right away. Do you understand?" Leo nodded, already distracted by his soggy cereal. After breakfast, with Leo settled in front of CBeebies, Amelia climbed the narrow steps to the attic. The low ceiling space was thick with dust and cobwebs, filled with cardboard boxes of Christmas decorations and old university textbooks. In the far corner sat a small trunk she recognized as having belonged to George's mother, Martha Harris. Martha had been a formidable woman with the same Yorkshire bluntness as her son, but none of his warmth. She'd never quite approved of Amelia, a London girl who talked posh and worked in publishing. But she'd adored Leo, her only grandchild, sometimes watching him with an intensity that bordered on fear. "He has the Harris eyes," she'd murmured once, stroking Leo's chubby toddler cheek. "God help him." Amelia had dismissed it as dramatic nonsense. Now, kneeling before Martha's trunk, she wasn't so sure. The lock was old and rusted, but gave way after some jiggling with a hairpin. Inside, she found neatly folded linens, some old photographs, and beneath them a bundle of leather-bound books tied with faded ribbon. The topmost diary was dated 1967, the year Martha had turned 20. Amelia opened it with trembling fingers. May 1967. Mum says, I mustn't go to the old church ruins anymore. She caught me there yesterday with Mary Thompson trying to do the ritual from great-grandmother's book. She was white as a sheet when she found us and dragged me home by the ear. Says it's dangerous, that our family knows better than to meddle with such things, but she won't tell me why. Amelia frowned. Martha had grown up in a small village outside Whitby on the Yorkshire coast. She remembered George mentioning ruins near his childhood home, remnants of an abbey destroyed during the dissolution. She flipped forward through the diary. June 1967, found great-grandmother's book hidden in Mum's dresser. It's older than I thought, the binding cracked and the pages yellow. Most of it's in Latin, but there are drawings too, circles with strange symbols and something that looks like a family tree but with black marks through some of the names. Our name, Harris, appears at the bottom, but it's spelled differently, Harry's. There's a warning on the first page, the firstborn son pays the price. June 1967, Uncle Thomas is getting worse. The doctors call it early onset dementia, but I heard Dad telling Mum it's the family curse taking hold. Uncle Thomas keeps talking about someone called Mordecai who's coming back. When I asked who Mordecai was, Dad slapped me for the first time ever. Amelia's pulse quickened. Mordecai, could this be the entity that had possessed George? The one that now wanted Leo? She continued reading, skimming through Martha's teenage angst and early romance with a local boy named Henry until a passage from 1968 caught her eye. April 1968, it's happened. Uncle Thomas is dead, hanged himself in the barn, left a note saying it was the only way to stop Mordecai from coming back through him. Mum finally told me everything tonight. How our ancestor, William Harris, made a pact with something dark in 1788 to save his dying son. How the price was that this thing, this Mordecai, would return through the bloodline, possessing the firstborn son of each generation when they reached their 35th year. How the only way to stop it is death. But there's more. Mum says there's a way to break the cycle, a ritual that can banish Mordecai forever. But the price is high. The willing sacrifice of a Harris by blood, but not by name. She says great-grandmother tried and failed and paid with her sanity. Amelia sat back on her heels, mind racing. George had turned 35 in February, just when his nightmares had begun. And now, this thing, this Mordecai, had set its sights on Leo, the next in the Harris line. She dug deeper into the trunk, searching for the book Martha had mentioned. Instead, she found a stack of letters tied with black ribbon addressed to Martha from her mother. The last one was dated just before Martha's death 3 years ago. My dearest Martha, I write this knowing my time grows short. The cancer has spread and the doctors give me months at most. Before I go, there are things you must know, things I've kept from you about our family's curse. You know the story of William Harris and his pact with Mordecai. What you don't know is why this entity chose our family. William wasn't just a desperate father. He was a member of a secret society dedicated to communing with beings from beyond our world. The ritual he performed went wrong, opening a door that should have remained closed. Mordecai isn't a demon, as we've always believed. He's something older, something that existed before names. The possession of our firstborn sons isn't random cruelty. It's Mordecai's way of returning fully to our world. Each possession brings him closer to permanent manifestation. The ritual to banish him requires the blood of one who carries Harris blood, but not the name, typically a daughter who has married. But there's a complication I never told you. The sacrifice must be freely given, but the one making it must not know the full consequences. A paradox that has protected Mordecai for generations. Watch over young George. When the time comes, you will know what to do. All my love, Mother. Amelia's hands shook as she refolded the letter. A sacrifice of Harris blood, but not Harris name. That would be her, who carried no Harris blood at all, or a female descendant who had married out of the family. But if Martha had known this, why hadn't she warned George? Unless... Amelia frantically searched through the remaining letters, finding one addressed to George, still sealed. With heart pounding, she broke the seal. My dear son, if you're reading this, then I am gone, and the darkness has found you. I tried to protect you, to keep the truth from you in hopes that ignorance might shield you. I was wrong. By now, you'll have felt Mordecai's presence. The nightmares will have begun, and your eyes will have started to change. There isn't much time. There is only one way to save yourself and protect your son. The ritual in great-grandmother's book requires a sacrifice, but not the one our family has always believed. The true sacrifice must be the host, you choosing to die before Mordecai can fully manifest. But your death alone won't end this. Someone must perform the banishing ritual at the moment of transition. When Mordecai is caught between vessels, only then can he be trapped and destroyed. I've left the book with Eliza Thorne in Whitby. She keeps a small bookshop near the Abbey steps. She's one of us. She'll understand when you mention the name. Harry's, I'm sorry, my son. I should have told you sooner. With all my love, Mother. A cry from downstairs jolted Amelia back to the present. Mummy, where are you? Coming, Leo, she called, hastily gathering the letters and diary. As she descended the attic stairs, a terrible realization dawned. George had known. He'd read his mother's letter, understood what was happening to him. His final words, he's coming back, hadn't been about Mordecai possessing him, but about Mordecai moving to a new vessel, to Leo, and George had died before telling her how to stop it. Leo, darling, we're going on a little trip, Amelia said, hastily packing a small suitcase the next morning. Her son looked up from his breakfast, confusion in his hazel eyes. What about school? He asked. It's more important that we go see someone who can help us, Amelia replied, trying to keep her voice steady. She hadn't slept, spending the night researching the small coastal town of Whitby and this bookshop owner, Eliza Thorne. The drive north was tense. Every time Amelia glanced in the rearview mirror at Leo, she half expected to see those unnatural black eyes staring back, but he remained himself, chattering about dinosaurs and asking when they'd reach the sea. Whitby appeared through the mist like something from another time. The imposing Abbey ruins stark against the grey sky, and the harbour nestled below, fishing boats bobbing in the choppy North Sea. The town was quiet in the off-season, most shops along Church Street displaying reduced winter hours signs. Eliza Thorne's bookshop was tucked between a tea room and a jewelry store selling Whitby Jet. The bell jingled softly as they entered. The smell of old paper and leather bindings filled the air. Be back in a tick, called a voice from the back room. Leo immediately gravitated toward a display of children's books, while Amelia nervously fingered Martha's letter in her pocket. A woman emerged from behind a beaded curtain, wiping dusty hands on her apron. She was younger than Amelia had expected, perhaps early 40s, with prematurely grey hair pulled back in a messy bun and wire-rimmed glasses perched on her nose. "Can I help you?" she asked pleasantly. Then her gaze fell on Leo, and the smile froze on her face. Oh my. Are you Eliza Thorne?" Amelia asked quietly. The woman nodded slowly, her eyes not leaving Leo. "And you must be a Harris, or connected to them. My husband was George Harris. He died 2 nights ago." Eliza's face paled. "Come through to the back," she said, flipping the shop sign to closed. She gestured to a reading nook with children's books. "Young man, would you like to look at some stories while your mum and I have a chat?" Once Leo was settled, Eliza led Amelia to a small office cluttered with books and papers. She locked the door and pulled down the blinds. "You know, don't you?" Amelia said. "About the Harris family, about Mordecai." Eliza sank into her chair. "Martha told me you might come someday. I hoped you wouldn't need to." She opened a drawer and removed an old iron key. "I'm sorry about George. Was it quick?" "Yes." Amelia fought back tears. "But now I think it's happening to Leo." His eyes changed. "The night George died?" Eliza nodded grimly. "The transfer has begun. Mordecai can't fully possess a child so young. Their will is too malleable, their identity not fixed enough for him to take hold. But he can influence. Prepare the vessel." She unlocked a cabinet and withdrew a wooden box. "Martha left this for George. I suppose it's yours now." The box contained a leather-bound book, its cover worn smooth with age, and a cloth bundle that clinked softly when moved. "The Harry's grimoire," Eliza explained. "And the tools for the ritual?" Amelia opened the book carefully. The pages were brittle, covered in faded Latin text and strange symbols. "I can't read this. You don't need to." "I can." Eliza took the book. "My grandmother was a Harry's before marriage. That's why Martha trusted me." "The letter mentioned a sacrifice," Amelia said hesitantly. "Someone of Harris blood, but not name." Eliza's expression darkened. "That's the traditional understanding, yes, a female descendant who married out of the family, but Martha discovered something different." She flipped through the grimoire until she found a specific page. The original Latin was mistranslated. "It's not about blood sacrifice at all, son. It's about choice." She pointed to a passage. "This doesn't say blood of the innocent. It says choice of the innocent. The ritual requires Anis, someone who loves the possessed, purely without obligation of blood, to choose to confront Mordecai directly." "Me," Amelia whispered. "It has to be me." "Yes. You must enter the space between worlds and face Mordecai there, while he's between vessels, no longer in George, not yet fully in Leo." "How do I do that? Where is this place?" "It exists in dreams, in the moment between sleeping and waking." Eliza unwrapped the cloth bundle, revealing a silver knife, a small crystal vial, and several packets of herbs. "This is dream root, very rare. It will open the door, but Amelia," her voice became urgent, "you must understand the risk. If you fail, if Mordecai overpowers you in that place, he'll possess you instead of Leo. And through you, as Leo's mother, his influence will be even stronger. And if I succeed, then Mordecai will be banished, unable to return to this world. The Harris line will be free. What do I need to do?" "The ritual must be performed at midnight when the veil is thinnest. You'll need something of George's. His essence is still fresh in the spiritual realm." and something of Leo's to anchor you to him. Amelia nodded, thinking of George's wedding ring and a lock of Leo's hair she'd saved from his first haircut. But most importantly, Eliza continued, you'll need to be prepared for what you'll face. Mordecai will try to deceive you. He'll appear as George or as Leo or as someone else you trust. You must see through the disguise. How? The eyes. No matter what form he takes, his eyes will always betray him. Black as pitch, without reflection. Like George's eyes had been, like Leo's that night. Once you find him, you must use the knife, not to harm, but to cut the ties binding him to our world. The incantation is here. Eliza pointed to a short paragraph of Latin text. I'll teach you the pronunciation. For the next hour, Eliza drilled Amelia on the ritual words until she could recite them perfectly, explaining the setup needed for the ceremony. We'll do it tonight, Eliza decided. You can stay in my flat above the shop. I have a spare room for Leo. As they prepared to leave the office, Amelia asked the question that had been haunting her. What if I fail? Eliza's face was grim. Then we'll have no choice but to follow the old method, permanent separation of Mordecai from his vessel. You mean Leo would have to die before his 35th birthday, just as George did? It's the only other way to prevent Mordecai from fully manifesting. Amelia felt sick. That's not an option. Then don't fail, Eliza said simply. That night, after Leo was tucked into bed in Eliza's spare room, the two women prepared the ritual space in the bookshop's back room. They pushed aside furniture to create a circle, which Eliza marked with chalk and strange symbols. Candles were placed at specific points, their flames unnaturally steady in the drafty room. The dream root tea, Eliza said, handing Amelia a steaming mug. Drink it all, then lie in the center of the circle. I'll speak the opening words, and you'll feel yourself slipping away. When you're in the between place, recite the incantation. The tea was bitter, with an aftertaste like soil. Amelia clutched George's wedding ring in one hand and a lock of Leo's hair in the other. As she settled onto the cushions in the circle's center, Amelia, Eliza said softly, remember, no matter what you see, no matter what he promises or threatens, complete the ritual. The knife must cut the spiritual cord between Mordecai and the Harris line. Amelia nodded, already feeling lightheaded as the dream root took effect. Eliza began chanting in Latin, her voice seeming to come from farther and farther away. The room dissolved around her, the candles elongating into streaks of light. Then darkness. Complete, absolute darkness. Amelia floated in it, untethered, until gradually shapes began to form. Twisted, impossible architecture, staircases leading nowhere, doorways opening into void. George, she called, her voice echoing strangely. Leo? They're not here, said a voice behind her. But I am. Amelia turned. A man stood there, tall, handsome in an old-fashioned way, dressed in clothes from another century. His face was pleasant, almost kind, except for his eyes. Black, depthless pools that reflected nothing. Mordecai, she whispered, gripping the ritual knife tightly. He smiled, and in that smile, Amelia saw centuries of malice. Let's talk, shall we? He said, about your son and what you're willing to sacrifice to save him. Your son has quite a future ahead of him, Mordecai said, circling Amelia in the strange dreamscape. The Harris bloodline grows stronger with each generation. Leo will be my finest vessel yet. Amelia tightened her grip on the ritual knife. You'll never have him. Mordecai laughed, the sound echoing unnaturally. I already do. I've been with him since birth, whispering, waiting, just as I was with George and his father before him. The dreamscape shifted around them, transforming into a perfect replica of her Harrow kitchen. The night of George's death. He fought me. You know, Mordecai said, now wearing George's face, but with those same black eyes. Harder than any before him. For you, for Leo. He smiled with George's mouth, but in the end, they all surrender. Why? Amelia demanded, fighting to keep her focus despite the disorienting shifts. Why the Harris family? Why torment them? For generations. Torment? Mordecai seemed genuinely surprised. I offer power, knowledge. William Harris understood this. He invited me in willingly. To save his son, is that what the family history says? Mordecai laughed again. How convenient. No, Amelia. William sought me out because he craved what I offered. Sight beyond sight. Knowledge beyond human understanding. The power to reshape reality itself. The scene changed again. They stood in a stone chamber lit by torchlight. A man in 18th century clothing knelt within a chalk circle, reading from a book similar to the Harry's grimoire. Your precious William, Mordecai said, was the leader of an occult society dedicated to contacting beings from beyond your realm. He didn't summon me to save anyone. He did it for power. The kneeling figure looked up, revealing a face eerily similar to George's. Is it true? Amelia whispered. The Harris family has hidden the truth for generations, Mordecai continued. William's summoning went wrong. He couldn't control what he called forth, me, and struck a bargain instead. I would grant him the knowledge he sought, and in return, his bloodline would host my consciousness, allowing me to experience your world. You're lying, Amelia said, but uncertainty crept into her voice. Am I? The scene shifted again to a small cottage bedroom. A woman who looked remarkably like Martha Harris sat writing in a diary. Your mother-in-law discovered the truth. Why? Do you think she never warned George directly? Why leave cryptic letters to be found after her death? She knew the family's noble narrative was a lie, Amelia faltered. It made a twisted kind of sense. Martha's reluctance to speak openly, the hidden diaries, the sealed letter left for George to find only after her death. What do you want? She asked finally. To continue existing, Mordecai said simply. Is that so monstrous? I experience your world through the Harris men, never fully controlling them until their final moments. His expression softened. I can leave Leo untouched if you offer yourself instead. Me? You're not of Harris blood, but you're connected to Leo by something even stronger, a mother's love. Through you, I could guide him without possession. He would remain himself, whole and unspoiled. Amelia hesitated, the knife trembling in her hand. Save Leo by sacrificing herself? Wasn't that exactly what she'd come to do? Don't listen to him, said a new voice. Amelia spun around. A woman stood behind her, elderly but with a dignified bearing. She seemed slightly transparent, her edges blurring into the dreamscape. Martha, Amelia gasped. The woman nodded. He twists the truth, Amelia. Always has. Mordecai snarled, his pleasant facade slipping. You're dead, old woman. You have no power here. I died fighting you, Martha replied calmly. That gives me power enough. She turned to Amelia. Yes, William sought forbidden knowledge, but not for himself. His son was possessed by something dark, the first manifestation of Mordecai. The ritual was an attempt to save him. She lies, Mordecai shouted, his form flickering between George and the handsome stranger. The bargain was real, Martha continued, but not as he claims. William offered himself in his son's place. Mordecai accepted, but with a twist. He would take not just William, but his lineage as well. The dreamscape shuddered violently. Cracks appeared in the reality around them. He's growing stronger, Martha warned. The connection to Leo is strengthening. You must complete the ritual now. Don't, Mordecai urged, his voice honeyed again. Let me show you the truth. He extended his hand, palm up. A thunderous knocking interrupted them, seeming to come from everywhere and nowhere. The physical world intrudes, Martha said urgently. Someone is trying to wake you. You're running out of time. Amelia raised the ritual knife, reciting the Latin words Eliza had taught her. But as she spoke, doubt clouded her mind. What if Mordecai was telling the truth? What if severing the connection harmed Leo somehow? Your husband believed me, Mordecai said desperately. Why do you think he chose death? He knew I was offering the better path. The knocking grew louder. The dreamscape began dissolving around them. Decide, Amelia, Martha cried. In the last moment before waking, Amelia saw something that froze her blood. A shadowy figure watching from beyond the dreamscape's edge. Not Mordecai, not Martha, but something else entirely. Something that seemed to smile as it watched the confrontation unfold. Amelia's eyes snapped open. She lay in Eliza's ritual circle. The candles burnt low, but it wasn't Eliza kneeling beside her. It was a man she'd never seen before, thin-faced, with calculating eyes. Behind him, Eliza lay unconscious, a trickle of blood running from her temple. Mrs. Harris, the man said, his crisp London accent at odds with the provincial surroundings. I've been looking for you. We need to talk about your son and about Mordecai. Who are you? Amelia gasped, scrambling backwards. Someone who knows the truth about the Harris family. He extended a business card. My name is Richard Blackwood. I represent an organization called the Covenant. We've been monitoring your family for generations. Amelia stared at the card. It bore only a name and a simple emblem. A circle containing an eye. Where's Leo? She demanded. Safe for now, but he won't remain so without our help. Blackwood glanced at the grimoire lying open beside her. That book is incomplete, the ritual flawed. Following it would have destroyed you both. How do you know about Mordecai, about the possession? Blackwood helped her to her feet. Mrs. Harris, the entity you know as Mordecai isn't what you think, and neither was your husband. Where's my son? Amelia demanded again, staring at Richard Blackwood as Eliza groaned and began to stir on the floor. Upstairs, still sleeping, Blackwood replied. I assure you he's unharmed, but we need to move quickly. I don't even know who you are. Amelia helped Eliza to a sitting position. Are you all right? Eliza touched her temple, wincing. He struck me from behind, came in through the back door. Her eyes narrowed at Blackwood. The Covenant. I should have known you'd interfere. You nearly got her killed with your half-baked ritual. Blackwood snapped, then turned to Amelia. The Covenant has monitored supernatural entities for centuries. Mordecai is one of the oldest we've tracked. You've been watching my family? Amelia asked, disbelief and anger rising. Not closely enough, Blackwood admitted. We lost track of George after his mother died. Martha was our informant for years. Eliza laughed bitterly. Martha worked with them until she discovered they weren't interested in freeing the Harris line. They want to control Mordecai for themselves. Blackwood's expression hardened. That's not true. We seek to contain entities like Mordecai, not exploit them. Then why did you stop the ritual? Amelia challenged. Because it wouldn't have worked, Blackwood said flatly. It would have trapped you in the dreamscape forever, while Mordecai simply found another vessel. The true ritual requires something else. And I suppose the Covenant knows what that is? Eliza asked sarcastically. As a matter of fact, yes. Blackwood removed an old leather journal from his coat. This belonged to William Harris. The real account of what happened, not the family legend that's been passed down. And you just happen to have it? Amelia's suspicion deepened. The Covenant collects such artifacts. According to this, Mordecai isn't a single entity, but a fragment of something much larger. Something that exists across multiple realities. The fragment in the Harris bloodline is just one piece. So what does that mean for Leo? Amelia pressed. It means the ritual in the Harry's grimoire can't banish Mordecai permanently, only displace him temporarily, sending him to another branch of your family tree. There are no other branches, Amelia said. Leo is the last of the Harris line. Blackwood and Eliza exchanged glances. What? Amelia demanded. George had a half-brother, Eliza said quietly. His father had an affair. The child was born in secret, given up for adoption. That's impossible. George would have told me. He didn't know, Blackwood said. Martha kept it from him to protect him, but the bloodline connection is still there. If we banish Mordecai from Leo, he'll simply move to the half-brother's line instead. Amelia felt dizzy with these new revelations. So there's no way to end this? There is, Blackwood said, but it requires going to the source. The place where William Harris first made contact with Mordecai's dimension. The Abbey ruins, Eliza whispered. Tonight, Blackwood confirmed. At midnight, when the dimensional walls are thinnest, we can perform the true banishing ritual. And I'm supposed to trust you? Amelia asked. You don't have a choice, Blackwood replied. Leo's connection to Mordecai strengthens by the hour. By tomorrow, it may be too late. A cry from upstairs ended the debate. Mummy! Mummy! Where are you? Leo! Amelia rushed past Blackwood and up the stairs. Her son sat upright in bed, trembling. What's wrong, darling? He's getting louder, Leo whispered, clutching Mr. Hoppy to his chest. The bad man. He says he's coming tonight. Amelia's decision was made in that moment. Get your coat, Leo, we're going on another little adventure. An hour later, they stood among the ruins of Whitby Abbey, silhouetted against the night sky. The wind whipped off the North Sea, carrying the scent of salt and seaweed. Below them, the town's lights twinkled, oblivious to the ancient battle about to unfold. Blackwood worked methodically, setting up a ritual space different from Eliza's. 5 black candles marked the points of a pentagram. Within a circle of salt at the center, he placed a strange device, a brass sphere etched with intricate symbols mounted on a tripod. And a dimensional anchor, he explained when Amelia asked. It will stabilize the gateway long enough for you to enter Mordecai's realm physically, not just in spirit. Me? Again? Amelia clutched Leo's hand tighter. You've already established a connection, and as Leo's mother, your bond can counteract Mordecai's influence, and my son stays here within the protective circle. Blackwood nodded toward Eliza, who was drawing additional symbols around the perimeter. She'll watch over him. I thought you didn't trust her, Amelia said quietly. I don't, but she cares for Leo's welfare, and that's enough for now. The preparations took another hour. Leo, exhausted, fell asleep in Amelia's lap as Blackwood recited strange incantations over the brass sphere, which began to emit a soft, pulsing light. "It's time," he finally said. "Place Leo in the inner circle." Reluctantly, Amelia carried her sleeping son to the center of the pentagram to harm. Eliza draped a protective amulet around his neck. "This will shield him while you're gone," she said. "But hurry, the gateway won't remain stable for long." Amelia knelt beside Leo, brushing hair from his forehead. "I'll fix this," she promised. "Whatever it takes." "That's what George said," Blackwood remarked from behind her, "the night he came here alone." Amelia turned, shocked. "What do you mean? George never came here." "He did. 3 days before he died. Martha's letter led him here, just as it led you to Eliza." Blackwood's expression was unreadable in the candlelight. He attempted the ritual himself, but failed. That's why Mordecai was able to take him so completely. "You saw him? You spoke to him?" Anger flared in Amelia's chest. "You could have helped him. We tried. He refused our assistance, just as his mother had warned he would. The Harris pride." Blackwood adjusted the brass sphere. "Don't make his mistake." The device began to spin, its light intensifying. The air between the candles shimmered like heat rising from pavement. "Step through," Blackwood instructed. "Find the central chamber where William Harris performed his original ritual. Destroy the binding stone you'll find there." "How will I know it?" "Black obsidian carved with the same symbol as on my card. You can't miss it." He handed her a small hammer of polished silver. "Only this can break it." Amelia took a deep breath, looking back at Leo one last time. Then she stepped forward into the shimmering air. The transition wasn't at all like entering the dreamscape. This was physical, jarring, a sensation of being pulled apart and reassembled in the wrong order. She fell to her knees, gasping on a stone floor that seemed both solid and somehow insubstantial. She had arrived in a twisted version of the Abbey, the ruins restored, but wrong. Angles that shouldn't exist. Corridors that bent back on themselves. The stone was black, veined with pulsing red light, like blood through veins, and she wasn't alone. "I've been waiting for you," said George, stepping from the shadows. But it wasn't George. The black eyes revealed the truth. "Mordecai," Amelia said, gripping the silver hammer. "Or should I call you by your real name?" The thing wearing George's face smiled. "So, the Covenant told you some truths, but not all. Never all." It gestured around them. "Welcome to my true home, Amelia. The world between worlds. You're not George," Amelia said, circling the entity. Cautiously, the silver hammer cold in her palm. "Stop wearing his face." Mordecai smiled, his black eyes gleaming in the strange crimson light that pulsed through the distorted Abbey walls. "But it comforts you, doesn't it? Even knowing what I am, you still want to see him." "What you really are," Amelia countered, "is a parasite, living off the Harris bloodline for generations." "Parasite?" The thing wearing George's face laughed. "I've given the Harris men gifts beyond measure, knowledge, insight, power. You've given them early deaths and torment, only because they fight me." Mordecai's form shifted, becoming the handsome 18th century gentleman again. William understood, in the end. We could have been magnificent together. Amelia continued moving, searching for the binding stone Blackwood had mentioned. The cathedral-like space was vast, its architecture impossible, staircases spiraling to nowhere, archways opening to void. "The Covenant hasn't told you everything," Mordecai continued, watching her search. "They don't want me banished. They want me controlled, harnessed. Richard Blackwood has spent his career hunting entities like me for the Covenant to weaponize. You expect me to believe you over them? Amelia asked, though doubt gnawed at her. I expect you to question. George didn't, and look what happened to him. Mordecai's expression softened. He came here, yes, but not to banish me. He came seeking answers about his father, about the brother he never knew existed. Amelia faltered. How do you know about that? I know everything the Harris men know, their memories, their fears, their secrets. He stepped closer. George didn't die fighting me, Amelia. He died protecting you and Leo from the Covenant. Lies, Amelia whispered, but uncertainty crept into her voice. Ask yourself, who benefits from my banishment? Not Leo, the connection would tear him apart. Not George's half-brother, who doesn't even know what hunts him. Mordecai smiled sadly. Only the Covenant, who have sought access to my realm for centuries. A memory flashed in Amelia's mind, the shadowy figure she'd glimpsed at the edge of the dreamscape. Neither Mordecai nor Martha watching them both. Had that been Blackwood? The binding stone isn't what he told you, Mordecai said, as if reading her thoughts. Breaking it won't banish me. It will open the gateway permanently, allowing the Covenant full access to this realm and all the power it contains. Amelia's gaze fell on an altar at the chamber's center, where a black obsidian stone pulsed with the same rhythmic light as the veins in the walls. The Covenant's symbol, a circle containing an eye, was carved into its surface. Then why did George come here? She demanded. What was he trying to do? To communicate with me directly, without the Covenant's interference, to negotiate. Mordecai's voice grew earnest. He offered himself willingly, Amelia, not out of defeat, but strategy. He knew that voluntarily accepting me would give him control, allow him to direct my power rather than be consumed by it. Then why is he dead? Because Blackwood followed him here just as he followed you. He interrupted the communion, forced George back to your world before the process was complete. With our bond half-formed, I couldn't maintain my hold. George's body rejected me violently, so it's Blackwood's fault George died? Tears stung Amelia's eyes. In a manner of speaking, but George made his choice knowingly. His last act was to prevent me from taking Leo. Mordecai approached the altar. This stone doesn't bind me to your world, Amelia. It binds me from fully entering it. Break it, and you doom not just your son, but countless others. Amelia looked from the stone to the hammer in her hand. Whom could she trust? Blackwood and his secretive covenant? This entity who had haunted her husband's bloodline for generations, or her own instincts? The chamber shuddered suddenly, dust raining from the impossible ceiling. Blackwood grows impatient, Mordecai said. The gateway is destabilizing. You must decide quickly. How do I save Leo? Amelia asked, desperation in her voice. Complete what George began, the voluntary communion, not with Leo, but with yourself. Mordecai held out his hand. Accept me, and I will never touch your son. The Harris bloodline will be free, and you'd have me instead. A willing vessel is different from one taken by force. We would coexist, partner, rather than parasite and host. His black eyes held hers. It's what George was trying to do, finish what he started. Another tremor shook the chamber, stronger this time. Cracks appeared in the walls, revealing swirling chaos beyond. Amelia closed her eyes, thinking of Leo sleeping in the protective circle, of George's final words, of Martha's warnings, all the pieces aligned in a new pattern, revealing a truth she hadn't considered. She stepped forward, placing her hand in Mordecai's. "I accept," she whispered, "but on my terms." His smile widened. "Name them." "You will never touch Leo, never influence him. The Harris bloodline ends with him. Heal. Live a normal life, free of your presence." "Agreed. And you will show me everything, the truth about William Harris, about George, about what the Covenant really wants, as you wish." "Then I accept you, Mordecai, not as a parasite, but as a..." She hesitated. "A partner." The entity's cold hand tightened around hers. Energy coursed between them, neither pleasant nor painful, simply overwhelming. Amelia gasped as memories not her own flooded her consciousness. Centuries of the Harris lineage, William's desperate ritual, George's final sacrifice, and the truth about the Covenant. The chamber began collapsing around them as the gateway destabilized. Mordecai, now a part of her, guided her toward a rift in reality that led back to the Abbey ruins. "Quickly," he urged within her mind. "Blackwood will realize soon enough what's happened." Amelia stepped through the rift, the transition less jarring this time. She stumbled back into the physical world, where Blackwood stood anxiously beside the brass sphere. "Did you destroy it?" he demanded, then frowned, peering at her face. "Mrs. Harris?" "I destroyed nothing," Amelia said, her voice steady. "And neither will you, Richard." Blackwood's expression hardened as understanding dawned. "You fool, you've accepted it." I've learned the truth," she corrected, feeling Mordecai's presence within her, separate yet united, "about what the Covenant really wants, about what you did to George." She strode to where Leo still slept, peacefully within the protective circle. Eliza watched with wide eyes, sensing the change in her. "Step aside," Amelia told Blackwood. "We're leaving. You think I'll let you walk away?" He reached inside his coat. "Mordecai belongs to the Covenant now." "No," Amelia said calmly. "We belong to ourselves." With a gesture, she extinguished the ritual candles. The brass sphere exploded in a shower of sparks, making Blackwood cry out in alarm. Centuries of knowledge flowed through her. Mordecai's gift, now hers to command. "This isn't over," Blackwood warned, backing away. "For the Covenant it is," Amelia replied. "For my son, too. His bloodline is free now." She lifted Leo gently into her arms. "Come, Eliza. Dawn approaches and we have much to discuss." As they descended from the Abbey ruins, Leo stirred in her arms. "Mummy, is the bad man gone?" Amelia smiled, feeling Mordecai's presence settle within her, no longer a parasite, but a symbiote. "Yes, darling, the bad man can't hurt you anymore." "Did you make him go away?" "In a manner of speaking," she said, glancing back at Blackwood's retreating figure. "I made a choice. Sometimes that's all we can do, make the best choice available to us, even when all options seem impossible." The eastern sky brightened over the North Sea as they reached Eliza's car. A new day, a new beginning. "What will you do now?" Eliza asked quietly. Amelia gazed at the horizon, feeling the weight of centuries of knowledge, of power, of responsibility. "Live," she said simply. "Raise my son and ensure the Covenant never harms another family like mine." Within her, Mordecai's approval resonated. Not a possession, but a partnership born of sacrifice and love, the very things that had defined the Harris bloodline for generations. As the sun broke over the horizon, Amelia Harris held her sleeping son close, finally understanding what George had tried to do, what Martha had feared, what William had begun all those centuries ago. Some curses, she now knew, could become blessings if accepted with open eyes and a willing heart. Some sacrifices could save more than just those we love. They could redeem generations of pain and fear. And sometimes the monsters we fear the most are the ones that can teach us what it truly means to be human.